Every afternoon, as they were coming from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. It was a large, lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there over the grass stood beautiful flowers like stars. And there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate blossoms of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruit. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them. "How happy we are here," they cried to each other. One day, the giant came back. He had been to visit his friend, the Cornish ogre, and had stayed with him for 7 years. After the 7 years were over, he had said all that he had to say, for his conversation was limited. And he determined to return to his own castle. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden. "What are you doing here?" he cried in a very gruff voice, and the children ran away. "My own garden is my own garden," said the giant. "Anyone can understand that, and I will allow nobody to play in it but myself."
Surround you, gathering all your treasures around you, living a life apart. Not having anyone near you, building a wall and making them fear you, saying you have no heart. You're a fool if you think you can live your life without sharing sunshine and gladness. If you think you can live without love, you're building a wall of sorrow and madness. You're building a wall to surround yourself. You're just building a wall to protect yourself. You're just building a wall to defend yourself. But you're building
So he built a high wall all around it and put up a notice board. Trespassers will be prosecuted. He was a very selfish giant. The poor children had now nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. They used to wander round the high walls when their lessons were over and talk about the beautiful garden inside. How happy we were there, they said to each other. Then the spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of the selfish giant, it was still winter. The birds did not care to sing in it, as there were no children, and the trees forgot to blossom. Once, a beautiful flower put its head out from the grass. But when it saw the notice board, it was so sorry for the children that it slipped back into the ground again and went off to sleep. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost.
Spring has forgotten this garden, they cried. So we will live here all the year round.
The snow covered up the grass with her great white cloak. And the frost painted all the trees silver. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them. And he came. He was wrapped in furs, and he roared all day about the garden and blew the chimney pots down. This is a delightful spot, he said. We must ask the hail on a visit. So the hail came. Every day, for 3 hours, he rattled on the roof of the castle till he broke most of the slates. And then he ran round and round the garden as fast as he could go. He was dressed in grey, and his breath was like ice.
I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming,
said the selfish giant as he sat at the window and looked out at his cold, white garden.
I hope there will be a change in the weather.
But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none. He is too selfish, she said. So it was always winter there. And the north wind and the hail and the frost and the snow danced about through the trees. One morning, the giant was lying awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet to his ears that he thought it must be the king's musicians passing by. It was really only a little linnet singing outside his window. But it was so long since he had heard a bird sing in his garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. Then the hail stopped dancing over his head, and the north wind ceased roaring, and a delicious perfume came to him through the open casement.
I believe the spring has come at last,
said the giant. And he jumped out of bed and looked out. What did he see? He saw a most wonderful sight. Through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept in, and they were sitting in the branches of the trees. In every tree that he could see, there was a little child. And the trees were so glad to have the children back again that they had covered themselves with blossoms and were waving their arms gently above the children's heads. The birds were flying about and twittering with delight, and the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing. It was a lovely scene, only in one corner, it was still winter. It was the farthest corner of the garden, and in it was standing a little boy. He was so small that he could not reach up to the branches of the tree, and he was wandering all around it, crying bitterly. The poor tree was still covered with frost and snow, and the north wind was blowing and roaring above it.
Climb up, little boy,
said the tree, and it bent its branches down as low as it could. But the boy was too tiny, and the giant's heart melted as he looked out.
How selfish I have been,
he said.
Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put that poor little boy on the top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever.
He was really very sorry for what he had done. So he crept downstairs and opened the front door quite softly and went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, they were so frightened that they all ran away. And the garden became winter again. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. And the giant stole up behind him and took him gently in his hand and put him up into the tree. And the tree broke at once into blossom, and the birds came and sang on it. And the little boy stretched out his 2 arms and flung them round the giant's neck and kissed him. And the other children, when they saw that the giant was not wicked any longer, came running back, and with them came the spring.
It is your garden now, little children,
said the giant, and he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. And when the people were going to market at 12 o'clock, they found the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen. All day long they played, and in the evening they came to the giant to bid him goodbye.
But where is your little companion?
He said.
The boy I put into the tree.
The giant loved him the best because he had kissed him. We don't know, answered the children. He has gone away.
You must tell him to be sure and come tomorrow,
said the giant. But the children said that they did not know where he lived and had never seen him before. And the giant felt very sad. Every afternoon, when school was over, the children came and played with the giant. But the little boy whom the giant loved was never seen again. The giant was very kind to all the children, yet he longed for his first little friend and often spoke of him.
How I would like to see him,
he used to say.
The song I sang in my youthful years was restless as the spring, but now I'm into my autumn years, a different song I sing. Years go over, and the pleasure
Years went over, and the giant grew very old and feeble. He could not play about anymore, so he sat in a huge armchair and watched the children at their games and admired his garden.
I have many beautiful flowers,
He said.
but the children are the most beautiful flowers of all.
One winter morning, he looked out of his window as he was dressing. He did not hate the winter now, for he knew that it was merely the spring asleep and that the flowers were resting. Suddenly, he rubbed his eyes in wonder and looked and looked. It certainly was a marvelous sight. In the farthest corner of the garden was a tree quite covered with lovely white blossoms. Its branches were golden, and silver fruit hung down from them, and underneath it stood the little boy he had loved. Downstairs ran the giant in great joy, and out into the garden. He hastened across the grass and came near to the child. And when he came quite close, his face grew red with anger, and he said,
Who hath dared to wound thee?
For on the palms of the child's hands were the prints of 2 nails, and the prints of 2 nails were on the little feet.
Who hath dared to wound thee?
Cried the giant.
Tell me that I may take my big sword and slay him.
Nay, answered the child, but these are the wounds of love.
Who art thou?
Said the giant, and a strange awe fell on him, and he knelt before the little child. And the child smiled on the giant and said to him, You let me play once in your garden. Today you shall come with me to my garden, which is paradise.
High above the city, on a tall column, stood the statue of the Happy Prince. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes, he had 2 bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed in his sword hilt.
Stop this crying. Look, why can't you be like the Happy Prince? He never dreams of crying for anything.
Make way for his worship the mayor.
Why? On my soul, 'tis a little lad. How can you cry so much in my beautiful city? Is not the Happy Prince smiling down upon you? Nay?
The Happy Prince looks so beautiful.
He looks just like an angel.
statue of the Happy Prince must surely be the finest in all Christendom. I doubt if I could have designed a better one myself.
A chill northern wind blew across the square. The autumn was about to return. In the countryside, the peasants had finished the harvest, and the change in wind told the swallows that it would soon be time to leave for Egypt. One little swallow was not interested in leaving, for he had fallen in love with a most beautiful reed.
See how agile I am! Look at me! Say you love me.
The reed would nod and bow and make the most beautiful curtsies, for that was all she could do in the wind. Finally, the trees shed their leaves. It was the sign that autumn had at last come, and they all flew away. Several weeks passed, and the little swallow felt quite lonely and began to tire of his lady love.
She has no conversation. And she's always flirting with the wind. I love traveling, and my wife, consequently, should love traveling also. Will you come away with me? Will you?
The reed shook her head. She was so attached to her home.
You have been trifling with me. Well, you shan't see me again. I am off to the pyramids. Goodbye.
All day long, the little swallow flew. By nighttime, he arrived at the city.
Where shall I stay tonight? I hope the town has made preparations. Such a fine decision, with plenty of fresh air, and I have a golden bedroom. What's that?
He looks so beautiful in the moonlight. Surely he's the most handsome of all princes.
Me? A handsome prince? Why, of course.
Good night, my happy prince.
Good night. Oh, good night. Princess? What's that? Was it curious thing. There is not a cloud in the sky. The stars are quite clear and bright, and yet it is raining. What a dreadful climate. What is the use of a statue if it cannot keep the rain off? I must find myself a good chimney pot. Who are you?
I am the Happy Prince.
The Happy Prince. Well, if you're so happy, why are you weeping? You have quite drenched me.
When I was alive and had a human heart, I did not know what tears were, for I lived in the palace of Sans Souci, where sorrow is not allowed to enter. In the daytime, I played with my companions in the garden, and in the evening, I led the dance in the great hall. Round the garden was a very lofty wall, but I never cared to ask what lay beyond it. Everything about me was so beautiful. My courtiers called me the Happy Prince, and happy indeed I was, if pleasure be happiness. So I lived, and so I died. And now that I am dead, they have set me here so high I can see all the ugliness and misery of my city. And though my heart is made of lead, I cannot choose but weep.
What? Is he not solid gold?
Far away in a little street there is a poor house. One of the windows is open, and through it I can see a woman seated at a table. Her face is thin and worn, and she has coarse red hands all pricked by the needle, for she is a seamstress. She is embroidering a satin gown for the loveliest of the Queen's maids of honor to wear at the next court ball. In the corner of the room, a little boy is lying ill. He has a fever and is asking for oranges, but his mother has nothing to give him but river water. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you not bring her the ruby out of my sword hilt? My feet are fastened to this pedestal, and I cannot move.
But I have no time. I must leave for Egypt. My friends are flying along the Nile at this very moment.
Little swallow, will you not stay with me for one night and be my messenger? The little boy is so thirsty, and his mother so sad.
I don't think I like boys. They always throw stones at me. They never hit me, of course. We swallows fly far too well for that. Besides, I come from a family famous for its agility. Oh, it's very cold here, but I will stay for one night and be your messenger.
My gown will be ready in time for the state ball, but the seamstresses are so lazy and unreliable.
I feel. I must be getting better.
It is curious, but I feel quite warm now, although it is so cold.
When day broke, the little swallow flew down to the river to bathe. What a remarkable phenomenon. A swallow in winter, said the professor of ornithology as he was passing over the bridge.
Tonight I go to Egypt. Tonight I go to Egypt.
Wherever he went, the sparrows chirped and said, "What a distinguished stranger." So he enjoyed himself very much.
Have you any commissions in Egypt? I am just starting.
Swallow, little swallow, far across the city, I see a young man in a garret. He's trying to finish a play for the director of the theater, but he is too cold to write anymore. There is no fire in the grate, and the hunger has made him faint.
Well, I will stay one night longer. Shall I take him another ruby?
Alas, my eyes are all I have left. They are made of very rare sapphires. Pluck one out and take it to him so he can sell it for firewood and finish his play.
But I cannot do that.
Little swallow, do as I ask.
How could I have overlooked such a valuable gift? It must be from some great admirer. Now I can finish my play.
It's getting cold. It is time to leave. Tonight I fly to Egypt. Goodbye. I am off to Egypt. Goodbye, little sparrows. I have come to bid you goodbye.
Little swallow, will you not stay a little longer?
But it is winter, and the snow will soon be here. I must leave you, but I will never forget you. And next spring, I will bring you 2 beautiful jewels in place of those you have given away. The ruby shall be redder than a red rose, and the sapphire shall be as blue as the great sea.
In the square below, there stands a little match girl. She has let her matches fall in the gutter, and they are all spoiled. Her family is very poor, and her father will beat her if she doesn't bring home some money. Pluck out my other eye and give it to her, and her father will not beat her.
I will stay with you a little longer, but I cannot pluck out your other eye. You will be quite blind then.
Little swallow, do as I ask of you.
Oh, what a beautiful piece of glass. I must show it to my father.
You are blind now, so I will stay with you, always.
No, little swallow, you must go away to Egypt.
I will stay with you, always.
As the days passed, the little swallow never left the prince's side. He sat on his shoulders and told him many stories of what he had seen in strange lands. He told him of the red ibises that stand on the banks of the Nile and catch goldfish in their beaks, and of the king of the mountains of the moon, who is as black as ebony and worships a large crystal. Dear little swallow, you tell of marvelous things, but more marvelous than anything is the suffering of men and women. There is no mystery so great as misery. Fly over my city, little swallow, and tell me what you see there.
The city streets are sad and dreary. Why are the people in despair? Their clothes are torn, their eyes are weary. Poverty is everywhere. The children huddle close together, ragged and torn, their feet are bare. They bravely face the wintry weather. There's no fireside they can share, and the rich just ignore them, and they don't care. Where is the justice in all that I see? There is no justice in poverty.
And so the little swallow flew back to the happy prince and told him what he had seen. I am covered with fine gold. You must take it off leaf by leaf and give it to my poor. The living always think that gold can make them happy. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold the swallow picked off, till the happy prince looked quite dull and grey. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold he brought to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosier, and they laughed and played games in the street. Then the snow came. After the snow came the frost, and the streets looked as if they were made of silver. They were so bright and glistening. Long icicles like crystal daggers hung from the eaves, and everybody went about in furs.
Goodbye, dear prince. Will you let me kiss your hand?
I am glad that you are going to Egypt at last, little swallow. You've stayed here too long, but you must kiss me on the lips, for I love you.
It is not to Egypt I am going.
A curious crack sounded inside the statue, as if something had broken. The fact is, the leaden heart had snapped right in two. It certainly was a dreadfully hard frost.
Dear me, how shabby the Happy Prince looks.
Shabby, shabby, terrible, dreadful.
The ruby has fallen from his sword. His eyes have gone, and he is golden no longer. In fact, he is little better than a beggar.
Little better than a beggar.
And there is actually a dead bird at his feet. We must issue a proclamation that birds are not allowed to die here.
Birds are not allowed to die here. As he is no longer beautiful, he is no longer useful. Our city needs a new statue, and I shall ask for the privilege of designing it.
So they pulled down the statue of the Happy Prince and melted it down in a furnace. The mayor held a meeting of the corporation to decide what was to be done with the metal.
I would consider it a privilege to design a new statue.
Of course you can. And it shall be a statue of myself.
What a strange thing. This broken lead heart will not melt in my furnace. We'll have to throw it away.
And so they threw it on a dust heap, where the dead swallow was also lying. "Bring me the two most precious things in the city," said God to one of his angels. And the angel brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. "You have rightly chosen," said God. "For in my garden of paradise this little bird shall sing forevermore. And in my city of gold the Happy Prince shall praise me."